Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of Ghost Stories with Kitton. We are live from Savannah, Georgia, a very haunted city indeed, situated in the United States of America. So let's get to it. Real paranormal stories read to you by a real human and not AI. Let's go. Also, before we begin, happy October to those of you listening. I hope you're enjoying this spooky season. Our first ghost story of the evening. Dealing with a ghost. A little background before we get into it. The 1900 storm in Galveston, Texas, was the worst storm in recorded history. So many lives lost that they didn't have a place to even put the bodies. They buried them at sea, only to have them wash back up on the shore. That's terrible. Very few houses remained out of a previously thriving metropolis. Well, I moved into one of those Victorian homes in February of 2020 with the goal of turning it into a photography studio and an art gallery. I filled the home with antique furniture to make the ambience complete. Shortly after moving in, I began experiencing phenomena that couldn't naturally be explained. It was the sound of doors slamming, but all the doors were as if they had been left, ringing the old manual doorbell you had to turn by hand, with none at the door. Sudden chills in the house. You remember, this is Galveston. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Galveston. And I was already mowing the lawn in February. A feeling of a presence would overcome me at times when I walked next to and down the old wooden staircase. After a while, one night, I decided I would have a talk with whatever or whomever was residing in this house with me. I poured 2 rum and cokes and lit an antique lamp. I walked up about halfway up the staircase and sat down. I then casually sat and said we needed to have a quick talk. I offered the drink to them, and then set it next to me. The steps were quite long. I explained that I wasn't going anywhere, and that she, I just knew at this point it was female, wasn't expected to leave either, so we were going to have to get along. Several nights later, I had a guest arrive, a girlfriend with her female pit bull that stayed a couple of weeks. The only phenomena that occurred during her stay were feelings of her presence, Luna, the dog, barking for no apparent reason, the chills by and on the staircase. It was the middle of summer by now. During my girlfriend's stay, we shot an art nude set next to the staircase. She left for a shoot in New Orleans several days later. Several nights after my girlfriend left, I was lying in bed. I was completely sober, by the way, when I saw, through my Hevel, H-V-E-L, not sure what that is, a woman dressed in Victorian clothing come through the bedroom door. She approached me, and then I felt her lay next to me. This was definitely something new to me. I wasn't sure how to react. At this point, I have no idea what a Hevel was, or me either, but more on that later. She cuddled up next to me, and we went to sleep. What else could I have done? I finished editing the shots from the staircase shoot, and named and dedicated that whole set to the spirit of the staircase. I had the best shot printed and hung it up below the staircase. After that, I experienced no other activity other than feeling of her presence and the occasional chill. I moved out a couple of months later, taking the print with me. COVID had prevented me from making any money with the studio or the art gallery. A year or so later, I made a trip back there. I saw the neighbor and spoke with him. A large Latino family had moved into that house, and not too long after I'd left. He said shortly after they had moved in, they picked up and left in the middle of the night. Draw your own conclusions from that. Moved into a haunted house in the woods. When I was 10, we moved about an hour away to a big house. It was on the far side of town and had 6 bedrooms and 18-foot vaulted ceilings, a large backyard with a giant oak tree in the center with a small hill. I heard my parents talking about how the house was just an amazing price. We had no neighbours for over a mile, but the highway was close to the back side of the house, probably about 500 feet away, surrounded by woods. I remember the first night we stayed there. No beds or furniture, only blankets, pillows, and a TV with DVD player. We put on a movie in the living room, and everyone fell asleep on the floor, except for me. The living room was 3 sets of sliding glass doors with no curtains. They looked into the backyard and into the woods behind the fence, and I remember looking out the window and seeing red eyes looking back at me, moving towards the glass doors. I threw my blanket over my head and remained as still as possible for what felt like an eternity. I finally got the courage to look again, and they were gone. Only darkness, that of the woods, remained. Next story. Some real scary paranormal stories for you. Okay, so I've got a few short stories for you. 3 of them happened to me. 1 happened to my nana, and 1 happened to my dad. 1. One night after supper, I was in my room, bouncing on my yoga ball and listening to music. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw this dark figure slowly creeping around the corner of my room. It looked like it was crouching. When I looked at it, it suddenly vanished. At the time, I had no idea that it was what we now know as a shadow person. Somehow I did not feel scared, just completely puzzled, and I then went back to listening to my music afterwards. 2. This one is a little scarier. It was at night time, and everyone had gone to bed. I was sleeping upstairs, on an old day bed that my family used to own. I was laying awake in the bed, just staring up at the ceiling, when I suddenly heard knocking on the attic door. No one can get in there. According to my brother, the floor is so weak you could fall through it. Allegedly, I'm not actually sure if that's true. The door is also locked. I told my family about this the next day, and they didn't believe me. They said I was probably dreaming about it. I told them I was awake, wide awake, but they still didn't believe me. The only way I felt safe sleeping upstairs was when I slept with my creepy baby doll. I know, that's weird, lol. Apparently it scared away whatever had knocked on the door. Maybe about a year later, I tried sleeping upstairs again. I ended up taking all my stuff back down to my room and sleeping in my bed because I felt so scared and paranoid. I heard faint sounds of what sounded like metal chains dragging on the floor in the attic. I was terrified. It's been years now, and I haven't heard anything else in the attic since then, and I haven't felt any bad vibes. 3. One night, I was laying in bed in my room, just minding my own business, when one of the figurines on the shelf next to my bed moved by itself. After it moved, it sounded like something had taken a step back, as if it was looking at what it had done, like how people step back to look at a decoration they have put up or adjusted. I started to feel surprised and paranoid. I did end up falling asleep though. When I woke up the next morning, 2 of the figurines were moved looking at me. The funny thing was, I was thinking about an FNAF song called Ghost, right when this happened. I guess paranormal beings have a sense of humour. 4. This one was short. I was in my room watching videos, and Dad was upstairs. He came to my room and asked if I'd yelled for him. I said no. He said he heard me calling for him, even though I clearly did not. Could there be a mimic in my house? 5. This one is probably the scariest story of them all. It definitely kept me up at night. This happened to my nana at night time. She said she had woken up one night to see a dark figure standing by her bed. At first, she thought it was my aunt, who lives with her, and said, "Are you trying to scare me?" And then she realized it wasn't my aunt. She looked over at her door and saw a second figure just standing there. Both figures was staring and smiling at her. She said that she told them, "I'm not getting up," and they both walked out of her room and vanished. She thinks they were angels, but I think otherwise. They were either shadow people, as in shadow figures, or maybe some other type of demon. Sleep paralysis, though she could move and talk, or a dream. My mum's paranormal encounters. I recently made a post looking for advice on a paranormal encounter I had in 2013, but I wanted to also share one that happened with my mother. In the same general time frame of my paranormal experience, my mum had been seeing things being thrown off counters, candles going out, doors opening, the whole 9 yards. My mum had always been a paranormal believer, but this is what really convinced her. She'd been sleeping in bed with her boyfriend at the time. It was in my room, also sleeping, and the boyfriend was passed right out sleeping too. When she woke up, she heard some shifting in the bed and assumed it was him, so she tried going back to sleep. She then felt an extra weight added to the bed. When she looked over, she found some type of entity straddling her boyfriend, oh dear, with its hands on his neck. My mum described it as textbook to what you think of when you think of elderly, malicious spirit. The long, silver-white hair, the pale skin, and the white nightgown. Obviously it scared the hell out of her, as it would anyone, and she started screaming. She closed her eyes, and in that time her boyfriend woke up. But when her eyes opened, the entity was gone. My mum's boyfriend was just so confused what she was screaming about. After this, objects moving worsened, and it followed her when we eventually moved out of that house. Anyone have any ideas? Any info would be greatly appreciated. Anyone else have an experience with a weird ghost / doppelganger / shape-shifting thing like me? So this happened when I was in elementary school, and I'm an adult now. Kind of hate talking about it because it genuinely creeps me out. But I'm interested to see if anyone has experienced something similar, if there's any explanation you might have. One afternoon, I was sitting on the couch with my mum watching TV. This was during the day. My dad came home from work because he worked in construction. He would shower before doing anything. So he comes in and says he's going to take a shower. After maybe like 30 minutes or so, he comes out of the bedroom fully dressed and said he's going out and will be right back. My mum asks him, out where? He ignores her and just leaves. At the moment, I thought he was mad or something, since my parents used to argue quite a lot. Fast forward a few minutes. My dad walks out of the bedroom again. Both me and my mum were like, what the hell? Didn't you just leave? He looked so confused and was like, no, I was showering. We both freaked out. My mum tried to tell him how he came out and was like weird and serious and had just left a few minutes ago. My dad claimed he was showering this whole time and that we'd completely imagined it. So what the fuck did we see? A ghost? A doppelganger? A laughing roommate in the background? A shapeshifter? Till this day, we have no explanation. It looked and sounded just like him. For context, this wasn't a dream. We both witnessed this. It happened during the day. We also lived in a 3-floored apartment, and there was only one entrance, and you have to go through the living room, where we were to get inside. We lived at the very top floor. My mum believes it was a ghost, and that somehow and for some reason it made itself to look like my dad. But personally, I'm not too sure. It was a ghost that felt too real, perhaps, if that makes sense. This has been the only paranormal experience I've ever had. I'm not sure if the apartment was haunted, since we moved right there before I entered high school, years after, but nothing weird like that ever happened again. Anyone else have any similar story or theory of what happened? I'm convinced I saw a ghost in Santa Cruz, California. An encounter. So this happened in the early 2000s. I'm not really a ghost believer, but I remain convinced to this day what I saw was not a living person. So here's my story. I've always wondered if anyone else has encountered something similar in the area. Years ago, I had an unforgettable encounter that still haunts me. Despite periodically searching for similar stories, I've never found one that matches my experience. Here's what happened. In 2002, I was a young man living in Felton. Late one night, around midnight or 1 a.m., I was driving home from my girlfriend's house in Santa Cruz via the Graham Hill Road. Just after turning onto Graham Hill from Ocean Street, near the Santa Cruz Memorial Cemetery, the road begins to incline and curve with almost no shoulder. As I drove, a pickup truck ahead of me suddenly swerved sharply to the left, alerting me to something on the roadside. There, crouched on the edge of a road, was a small figure, a woman with long, straight, dark hair, wearing a white nightgown. Her head was tilted unnaturally towards the sky, her mouth open as if screaming to the sky above. This sight sent chills straight through me. I swerved to avoid her with my car, my heart racing. The fact that the truck ahead of me swerved too confirmed I wasn't just imagining things. My mind raced with possibilities. Could it have been a homeless woman or someone with a developmental disability who had wandered from a nearby home? I briefly considered stopping to help, but when the other vehicle didn't stop, I just kept going. To this day, I'm convinced I saw a ghost. I recently read about the white lady sightings in that area, and the location seems to be strikingly close to where I had my encounter. Even now, writing this gives me goosebumps. I've always wanted to connect with someone who might understand or offer insight into this eerie experience. It's such a strange thing to have happen, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you all for listening. My dead dad and his wallet. My dad died when I was young. I saw a medium, and he came through. She told me he wanted me to have his wallet, said although he didn't carry one, it was bought for him and he wanted me to have it. I searched my entire house and could not locate it. Around 5 weeks later, I had salmonella poisoning and I was very sick. Back then it took days to get a test. I was laying in bed and I woke up. My dad was standing at the side of the bed. He had been dead around 17 years at this point, and he looked so well. Suddenly I rose up and turned around. I was still laying on the bed. It felt very light and peaceful. He took me into the spare room where the wallet was floating above a box. We walked back into the room, stood by myself laying on the bed, and he almost threw me back into my body. I woke up and he was gone. The wallet was right on top of the box where he had shown me. Could it have been dehydration, lack of food? But how was the wallet where I saw it also in the dream? Years later, I can't explain it. Your narrator here, I think that was definitively an OB experience, an out-of-body experience. You left your body and your dad was there, and with his conscience he showed you where that wallet was. And that really was there in real life, so I believe that was a very real experience with your dad there. He vanished mid-step, and someone else saw it too. This happened about 3 months ago, around 6:30 p.m. I was living with my uncle at the time, working in his shop during a long holiday from campus. I was walking home, taking a long route, not for the view but for privacy. I use that path so I can smoke without my aunt finding out. It's quite a stretch, long and winding, but it's worth it for the secrecy. That evening, I passed my friend who sells water at a small shop along the route. We exchanged a nod, nothing unusual there. The sun had dipped low, and the road ahead was folding into darkness. Not sudden, just the kind that creeps in naturally. I usually avoid smoking if someone's coming my way. I don't want to be recognized and risk word getting back to my family. But that day, I saw 2 people on the road. One was ahead of me, walking in the same direction. The other was coming towards us, about to pass the first guy. The one coming towards us wore white, easy to spot, in the fading light. The other ahead of me wore black. I slowed down, looked around, and decided to light my cigarette. I glanced down to strike the lighter. When I looked up, the man in white was gone. Just gone. No sound, no movement, no trace. The guy ahead of me had just passed him. He turned his head, not out of curiosity, but because he had seen something shift. I watched his body freeze for a split second, like his brain could not process what his eyes had just witnessed. He had seen the man in white, and then also saw him disappear. His reaction was instant. He bolted uphill, like fear had detonated inside of him. No hesitation, no looking back, just pure fright. I froze. My insides turned. I wonder if I should even keep walking in that direction. But I did. When I reached the spot where the man in white had been, I checked the bushes. Maybe he was hiding. Maybe this was a prank. But there was no one. No rustling. No footsteps. Just silence. Wish I could talk to the guy who ran away. Maybe he did see what I saw. Maybe he saw more than I did. But I never found him. And I went home shaken, avoiding that path for quite a while. But eventually I returned to it. The fear passed, but the memory didn't. I don't think it was my eyes playing tricks on me. I believe what I saw was real. What do you think? I think that was real, and I think that was a good story. Family occult story. My family on my father's side has always been highly spiritual, but not at all religious. Many of my family members on that side have their own ghost stories or experiences with the beyond. I'm pretty skeptical, but I figure, why not tell some strangers the itch in the back of my subconscious? So I'll start by saying my great-grandmother, Magdalena, was a survivor of World War II, and she'd fled from the invasion of her homeland in Lithuania. I'm not clear on many details on that front, as my parents were tight-lipped and fiercely Republican. And so, Magdalena's son would wed my grandmother, Catherine. She claims to have Native American heritage, but I've known her to tell hard-to-believe tales before, like the one that follows. She told many stories, but the one that plagued my sleep the most would be the one where the phantom taps kept her awake. She would tell us that she was surely alone in a farmhouse, just with the dogs that night, and in her bed she felt a tap on her hind. For some reason, I would always characterize the scene as needlessly as her being on a bunk bed, and it would further the mystery for me. Mind you, I slept in a bunk bed above my brother for years. She would tell it to such effect that we would be breathless and staring at each other, my brother and I, with such whimsy about us. We didn't know that was the goal. Later in life, I would experience my own occult phenomena in my aunt's house. It is true that the housing complex we lived in was built on indigenous burial grounds, and I'm sure my family had heard that as often as we had, even as children, because our city profited from those cities. I reported seeing a little Native American girl up the stairs at my aunt's house, holding a little dolly and warning me. I don't remember exactly what I determined the warning was about, but it had shaken me. As a child who indulged in mystery, to divulge it to the adults, and then immediately acted in reverence, which, I think, I probably loved a lot. I was a kid who wished to be taken very seriously. They told me of my older cousin seeing the very same visage, that I was more than enough with that knowledge to solidify it as an act to me. Cut the young me indulging in and committing fully to all things paranormal now. I questioned everything, and I was obsessed with the unknown. Years later, I would find out that people telling me the paranormal was real were just fucking with me. Just a joke, because you believed in it so much. It was funny, don't you think? And that anyone that I had heard out were victims of the same cruel joke. So, my father's brother also told a story that my father corroborates to this day, that they saw their grandmother on their mother's side washing dishes in the kitchen of a window of their farmhouse in the dead of night. once coming home late. They swear that they saw her washing them the way that she always had, scrubbing with a scour and holding it to the light to see it shine. They investigated the house, but it was empty when they came in. I've also had experiences, such as when I took my friends to a road that was known to be spiritually attuned. We spent the late night walking in a now defect road and taking pictures. Later, we then reviewed the footage. A bright light was near me in each picture that I was present in. An orb of light accompanied my image in each one. But the ones absent of me, they were absent of that orb of light as well. I seemed to be in this notion that it was following me on a starlit path. And I had told my friends as we walked, I felt an energy presence with us that was clearly alien to us. I don't know how to explain some of these things, like how people close to me say I can predict things before they happen, and that I seem to know things that nobody else could guess. I've always thought it was my instinct or some intuition, but lately it's hard to deny that I have an intrinsic sense of some other sense. The woman in my dream. I was young at the time, maybe 11 years old. I had this strange dream of this woman who just kept walking through the halls upstairs, coming up the stairs from the first floor. I was terrified in this dream of this woman, because she looked like she would come into my room, and then I'd be stuck in my bed, suddenly unable to move, as if paralyzed. She would tell my dad that she would tell me that my dad wasn't good for my mum, and that she deserved better. She just kept chanting this, but in a sort of terrifying way. The next morning I told my mum about it, how I slept awful from the nightmare, and I was scared to sleep upstairs. My mum paused and said my sister who died was named Linda. My parents ended up divorced only 2 years later. My mum did deserve better. I don't know if this is a coincidence or not, and I don't see any reason for this woman in my dream to be telling me this information in such a scary way. If it was my dead aunt, especially in my dreams and terrifying me, that's interesting to me. Her sister also died very young, so she wouldn't have been an adult, but I still think about it a lot and the connection with my mum. My brother can tell when someone's going to die, but how does he see it? This is a story I heard from my friend Melissa, a pseudonym, about her older brother. I decided to write it down in her own voice, so if you have some time, please read it. I have an older brother, 3 years older than me. My brother has always been quiet since he was little, the kind of person you'd call sensitive or overly serious. While most boys loved to play outside and be loud with friends, he hated noise and preferred to stay indoors, watching TV or reading comic books. He was completely the opposite of me. He was always outside making noise and laughing with friends. Even our parents and relatives used to say, "It's like the two of you were born switched." Even so, we got along surprisingly well. We often talked about TV shows and comic books together. Since my brother rarely went out, he didn't have many friends. One day I asked him, "Aren't you lonely? Don't you have any friends? You do have friends, don't you?" He answered, "I'm not lonely. I have 2 friends in the house. I talk to them about all sorts of things." Our family was poor at the time, so we lived in an old, run-down rental house in a cheap neighborhood. But I'd never seen my brother with anyone other than family, so I asked, "Where are your friends in the house?" He said, "They don't come out when everyone's awake, it's too noisy. They come out at night, when I'm the only one here. That's when we talk." It sounded strange, but since my brother often made up stories and wrote them down in notebooks, I figured it was just one of his imaginations. I remember hearing about his 2 friends a few more times after that. A few years passed. I was in middle school, and my brother was in high school. On our way back from visiting my father's parents, they lived in a farmhouse out of the countryside. My brother, sitting beside me in the back seat, whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "Grandpa doesn't have much time left." My family's family were farmers, and Grandpa was strong and full of life. He'd never been sick a day in his life. He ate well, drank a lot, and was more energetic than anyone else. The thought of him dying soon was absurd. Me, what do you mean? He looks perfectly fine to me. Brother, you'll understand soon enough. Grandpa doesn't have any colour left. Me, no colour? What do you mean by that? He didn't answer, just turned his face toward the window, his expression unreadable. By then, I had already realized that my brothers might have what people call a sixth sense. I figured those two friends from his childhood were probably spirits. He would often get nauseous or feel chills whenever he went to places where accidents or tragedies had happened. So when he said he doesn't have much time, I felt something indescribable, a chill that crawled up my spine, and I couldn't even sleep that night. A few days later, Grandpa was diagnosed with liver cancer. It was stage 2, but his liver was strong, and it had not spread further. He underwent surgery and began chemotherapy. Since his life wasn't in danger, the family relaxed and visited him often at the hospital. Everyone, except my brother. He went with us one day, on the day of the surgery, but as soon as Grandpa was wheeled out of the operating room, he turned pale and said he felt sick. After that, he never visited again, no matter how much our parents asked or scolded him. He wouldn't say a word about Grandpa, and eventually they just stopped asking. 10 days after the surgery, just when everyone thought Grandpa was recovering, he passed away suddenly, not from cancer, but from a heart attack. When I heard the news, I thought, so my brother did know. My brother, who usually disliked most people, had always loved Grandpa. At the funeral, he cried silently without making a sound. Even now, as adults in our 40s, that was the only time I've ever seen my brother cry. He once said to me, when someone's close to death, their colour starts to fade, and I can tell somehow that their time is near. When it's truly the end, they turn sort of black and white, like all the colour drains away. When Grandpa came out of the operating room, he was completely black and white, and it was hard to even look at him. Now both my brother and I are in our 40s. That strange ability of his to see people turn from colour like that before they die has faded with time. He says he hardly sees it now anymore. Audio from hell. The studio recorded more than music. This is a story that my friend Nicholas, a pseudonym, told me about something he experienced around 15 years ago when he was working in a recording studio in Manhattan. I've compiled the details he shared, and I'll write it in his voice. At the time, even though I was only working as an assistant, I dedicated myself to assisting a senior engineer for about 4 years. Once I'd learned all the ropes, the senior engineer asked me if I was ready to become a staff engineer. To work as a staff engineer, I had to be able to handle all recording tasks alone. It wasn't until I could manage everything, from meetings with a band, to setting up recording, tracking down, and then the final sound adjustments, that I was considered fully competent. To judge my ability, I had to take on a trial recording session. Naturally, as someone staff half-trained, I couldn't be in charge of recording a famous skilled band. I was assigned to an amateur band, preferably one that was not highly skilled. It was a 3-person amateur band of college students who had made a reservation. They wanted to record 2 songs as cheaply as possible and in a short amount of time, as this was their first time. It's not a nice way to put it, but from a studio's perspective, they were a band we could afford to fail with. I became the one in charge. The recording was scheduled for 2 days, including the mixdown. On the day of this session, after a brief meeting, we immediately started setting up the drums and bass, and the recording began. The college students were reasonably competent, and the recording process went smoothly. It happened while we were recording the guitar. The guitarist stopped playing mid-performance and asked, "Didn't you just hear a woman's voice?" In recording, we essentially never speak to the person performing during a take. Also, the voices me, the engineer, and the other members waiting in the mixing room didn't reach the performer's headphones unless we pressed the talkback button. Of course, no one was speaking at that moment. The guitar was being played in a small room called a booth, sealed by a thick door so no external sound could get in. I checked the recording sound, but since there was no sound resembling a voice, I told him, "It must be your imagination," and we continued recording. Since certain guitar effects can actually produce sounds similar to a human voice, I didn't worry about it at all. The guitarist mentioned a few more times afterwards, "I really feel like I heard a voice," but the other members and I just dismissed it as his imagination. Despite all that, the guitar recording was complete, without issue. All that remained were the lead vocals by the guitarist and the chorus parts from the other band members. But here we ran into a problem. We generally try not to record vocals across multiple days. This avoids shift in vocal quality mid-song. But the session time ran out just as the vocalist couldn't quit and quite nail the first song. However, the remaining time was just 1 day tomorrow, including the mixdown. So I made a proposal to the members. Fortunately, we had several takes of the vocals recorded. I suggested, since I would already be compiling the best parts and correcting any pitch issues, that we should start with the second song vocal tomorrow. Most recording engineers use a tool called Pro Tools, and with this tool, you can fix not only the pitch and the rhythm issues, but virtually any kind of error. The college band members looked a little frustrated, as they couldn't afford to spend too much money, but knowing they'd incur extra fees if they didn't finish in 1 day, they reluctantly agreed. After seeing the members off, all my night work began. I thought to myself, if I can finish in about 3 hours, I can probably get 5 hours of sleep. As I made myself some coffee and started fixing the vocals, the work progressed more smoothly than I had expected. Just as I finished fixing about half a song, I decided to take a break and tidy up the studio a bit to clear my mind. I was tidying up the cables in the booth and vacuuming when I thought I heard a woman scream, muffled by the sound of a vacuum cleaner. I immediately stopped to vacuum. The studio, where no external sound could enter, was enveloped in a silence so deep it hurt my ears. I waited quietly for a while, but I didn't hear the woman's voice. Just my imagination, or am I working too hard? That's what I thought. Just as I was about to return to the mixing room from the booth, the song we recorded today suddenly started blasting out at a deafening volume. It must be a glitch, I thought. Even though the sound was supposed to be routed only to the headphones, a blaring noise was coming from the main large speakers. All the recorded audio data was stored on the HDD. I saved the data periodically while I worked, but if the data were to be erased, that would be the worst-case scenario. I rushed to the PC and pressed the stop button. But the song didn't stop. The college student's song, which I had heard countless times today, just kept playing. I repeatedly pressed the stop button, but the song just would not stop. In fact, the PC stopped responding to any operation whatsoever. I briefly considered turning off the power, but I couldn't risk deleting all the data. As this was happening, the noise began to mix into the song. Mixed with the upbeat melody, I heard a zzz sound, like an old radio. A high-pitched clank-clank sound, like metal being struck repeatedly. The whole system might have truly crashed, I thought, just as I started thinking about giving up on everything and shutting down the power. A woman's shriek, loud, piercing, a scream, rang out with such volume that it drowned out both the song and the preceding noise. The woman's shriek assaulted my frozen body repeatedly with fear. The speakers were making a crackling, distorted sound as if they were about to break, and then, from deeper within the woman's shriek, I heard a child's voice, a genuine, heart-wrenching, crying sound. Next, I heard the sound of many adult men letting out a deep, guttural yell. Standing frozen, I imagined people running away from some enormous catastrophe. Looking back now, I feel as though this kind of audio you might capture if you placed a microphone in hell. It was exactly the sound of countless agonizing screams. The studio mic had picked up, as if it connected to the darkness, the very depths of hell itself.
How long had passed? It probably wasn't even 2 minutes, but the screams like the cries of agony gradually faded, and the original upbeat song by the college students returned. The time the song fully stopped, and returned normally when I pressed the stop button. I was dazed. I only pressed the data save button and decided to just get the hell out of the studio and rest in the office break room. In the break room was another senior engineer. He was also staying overnight to work. The senior engineer took one look at my face and asked, "Did you lose some data?" My face must have been extremely pale. I told the senior engineer about the horrific, agonizing screams that I'd just encountered. The senior engineer said, "There's nothing particularly known about this studio, but recording studios in general, not just this one, somehow have a lot of ghost stories. Indeed, I've also heard rumors about ghost stories at a famous studio in Los Angeles and Seattle." Afterwards, the senior engineer stayed with me in the studio, and somehow I managed to do the minimum necessary work until morning. Despite all the horrific screaming, there was no anomaly in the audio file, and the second day of recording was completed without any problems. Looking back now, perhaps something had already begun to transfer onto the audio file from the moment the guitarist said on the first day, "Didn't you just hear a woman's voice?" Ultimately, the truth remains unknown. But I realize such phenomena can happen whether a place has history or not. It's impossible to truly convey those agonizing screams in text, but they were truly terrifying. This was the first and last experience of its kind. But due to the overworking myself with consecutive all-nighters, I ended up breaking down physically and quit before becoming a true staff engineer. I returned to my hometown, and now I'm working in construction. Now that I've talked about this experience from 15 years ago, it makes me wonder, maybe I was the one who was cursed. My ghost story. When I was 15, I was hanging out with my older sister at her house. She was 23 at the time. It was around 12:30 a.m., and she made sure I got in the house when she dropped me off. I went upstairs and started taking off my makeup, brushed my teeth, and went to bed and turned off the light. The light was one of those lights that you turn on by twisting the thing on the bulb. So I clicked it. Then it somehow it went back on once. What I think they're trying to say. This is once I got under the blankets. I tried turning it off, and it didn't turn off. And then eventually I just unplugged the light entirely. Fast forward to maybe 30 to 45 minutes later, I hear my dad get up to go to the bathroom. Then he went back to his room. Then I heard my door open. The house was probably 100 years old, so we have creaky doors. So I said, "Dad?" And then my door latch closed and I could feel breathing on my neck. I turned around. No one was there, but the breathing and the faint light was. I plug my light in, and the door opens and closes again as I hear footsteps running down the stairs, unlocking my front door and slamming it shut. On to the next story. My friend said his grandfather never left the house. I wasn't planning to write this, but I saw a post earlier about haunted houses and it hit me like a punch in the gut. I haven't thought about that summer in years, but now I can't stop. I grew up in a small Bulgarian town, and when we were teenagers, we used to go exploring old factories, abandoned schools, that kind of thing, dumb stuff. One of my friends, Miro, said his grandma had this house out in the countryside, a few miles outside of town. Nobody had lived there since his grandpa died. He said we could go there for the weekend. No one will bother us. We can drink and smoke in peace. The moment we saw the place, I got this weird feeling, the kind where your stomach sinks before anything even happens. It was one of those old one-story houses with a broken fence and a yard full of weeds, taller than your knees. The windows were covered in grime, and there was this sort of musty smell that hit you as soon as you open a door. Inside, everything was exactly how someone might have left it 50 years ago. Old wooden furniture, yellowed lace curtains, family photos so faded you couldn't make out the faces. On the wall in the living room was a big round clock. Its hands were stuck at 12. We joked about ghosts at first, like any group of teenagers, but after midnight, when the laughter died down and the beer cans emptied, it got real quiet. Too quiet. Around 1 a.m., I went outside to take a leak. I remember how bright the moon was. The air was still, almost heavy. I was zipping up when I heard footsteps behind me, slow, heavy, deliberate. I froze. Turned around. Nothing. Just the wind moving through the grass. I went back inside and told Miro someone was walking around the yard. He looked at me, dead serious, and said, "That's normal. It's just Grandpa. He died here. But he never really left." I laughed at first, waiting for him to crack a smile, but he didn't. Before I could even say anything, something thumped from the next room. A heavy sound, like a chair almost tipping over. We all looked at each other. That room was completely empty. Then came another sound, a slow dragging, like wood scraping across the floor, and then a tick. We turned around, towards the old wall clock. Its second hand, which had been frozen since we got there, started moving, not forward, not backwards, but both. It ticked, and ticked, and ticked. One of the guys said, "What the hell?" under his breath. The sound filled the room louder and louder, echoing off the walls like there was 100 clocks ticking out of sync all at once. And that's when the lights started flickering. No one said a word, we just ran outside. We lit cigarettes with shaking hands. The night felt colder now, like the air itself had changed. Miro lit one extra cigarette and stuck it upright in the dirt. "For Grandpa," he said quietly. We stood there watching it burn. The tip glowed red and then faded and red again, like someone was actually taking slow drags from it. When it burned down to the filter, Miro just stared at the ash. After a while, we decided to go back in. The living room felt different, heavier somehow. The air smelled faintly like smoke, though none of us had smoked inside. And the clock, it was working again. The hands were moving smoothly, 2:57 a.m. We just stood there, staring. And when the hands reached 3 exactly, the ticking stopped. That perfect silence, I still remember it. You don't notice how loud silence can be until it feels alive. Miro's face went pale. He just said, "He's gone now," and walked outside. We left not long after that. None of us said much on the way home. It's been years, and that house is probably gone now. But sometimes, when I'm up late, and the world's dead quiet, I swear I can hear that same clock ticking, over and over. I don't believe in ghosts, but I never asked Miro what happened to his grandpa, and I don't plan to.
Alright, your narrator here. I wonder who's still with us at this point. If you're listening, I had to take a break because I was sitting sort of on a futon while I was recording and my legs went numb, so I had to sit up and stretch them for a bit. But I've got some more ghost stories for you, so if you're still listening, let's do some more. Something strange happened one night at a hostel in Indonesia. I don't know if anyone will believe this, but it really happened to me a couple of months back when I was backpacking in Indonesia. I was staying at this small old hostel in a quiet coastal town. I won't say the name, but it used to be part of an old Dutch area. The place looked nice online, but in person it felt kind of, I don't know, forgotten. There were only a few rooms, and that night I was the only guest. The back of the hostel had an old locked gate that led to a small cemetery and what looked like the remains of a Dutch church. The owner mentioned it once and laughed, But something about it didn't feel right, and that night I couldn't sleep. The place was too quiet, and I could hear every sound. Around midnight, I started hearing footsteps on the wooden terrace outside of my room, slow, heavy ones. It didn't sound like someone just passing by. It was more like whoever it was kept walking back and forth. The boards creaked with each step, and when it stopped right in front of my window, I just froze. I was sure someone was standing out there. I didn't move or make a sound. For a few seconds I heard what I swear sounded like breathing. Not loud, but close. My window curtain was thin, and I could see a faint shadow through it. It looked tall, taller than a normal person. I wanted to call out, but my voice wouldn't come out. After what felt like forever, the steps started again, slowly moving away down the terrace until everything went quiet. I didn't sleep after that. I just sat up and waited for the sun. In the morning, when I stepped outside, the dust on the terrace had marks in front of my room, like someone had walked there during the night. When I told the owner what I heard, he just gave me a weird sort of smile and said, "You're not the first." I left that morning and didn't look back. Even now I still remember those footsteps, slow, heavy, and too close. The night that I remembered. So this happened when I was in 4th standard. Not sure what that is, maybe someone in the comment sections can tell me. One day, our English teacher had an extra period at the end of the day. We all pleaded with her not to teach and tell us some horror stories instead. It was a cloudy and windy day, so the mood felt just right. I don't remember all the stories she told, but one thing did stay with me. She said there's a particular night, she didn't say which day or month, when spirits roam around the earth. That night, if they knock on your glass window or door, you must never knock back or open it. That very week, I'm not sure if it was the same night or next, something eerie happened. Our bedroom had a 3-pane glass window that opened up into that corridor, and our bed was placed right against it. I used to sleep with my parents back then. That night, we were getting ready to go to sleep. I was already under my blanket. My father was sitting on a chair near the bed. My mum was beside me, applying her moisturizer. Suddenly there was a loud knock on the lower glass pane of the window. At first I thought I was imagining things, because of the stories I had heard from earlier, from the teacher. But then my father turned and asked, "Did you just bang on the window?" I froze. I knew I hadn't. We were the only 3 people in the house. Not wanting to scare my parents, I lied and said, yeah, I did. But even now, I sometimes wonder, what would have happened if I hadn't remembered what my teacher had said to me that day? What if I had knocked back? I don't know if my teacher telling me a story was a coincidence, but I feel it protected me and my family that day. Even today, as an adult, I still get goosebumps just thinking about it. My dead uncle saw my message. My uncle-in-law, on my dad's side, died on the 14th of September 2025 from a 4-year battle with prostate cancer. His name was Greg, formerly known as Gregory Wright. I forgot the date of his memorial, but I went and didn't even know half of the people there, except for the close family. Anyway, a few days after he died, I sent him a message for some reason, but I think read, "I miss you so much, mate." I forgot about the message, but then today I went back onto my messenger and went onto his profile just to check if he somehow replied or saw my message for some stupid reason. But when I looked at my last message, which was one I told you guys about before, I saw that it actually did read, that he had read my message. My heart started beating really fast, my stomach twisted, because how could he have seen my message if he's dead? I don't know how he saw my message. But I have a question. Does someone confiscate your phone after you die, or does it get destroyed? You're narrator, I can answer that question. So yeah, usually what will happen is usually a family or loved one. Sometimes we'll take the phone, but it might, even if they have access, unlock it just to check messages, or maybe even turn their profile, like if it's on Facebook, into a memorial page. So I'm sure, don't worry,
I'm sure that he got your message, but the red was likely a family member or friend who saw it, so don't let that scare you. That old couch in the attic, and the black smoke that haunted it. When I was a kid, my family rented this old house for about 5 years. Around our 4th year there, me and my brother picked our way into the attic, even though the landlord warned us not to go up there. He said the floor was too weak or something. We picked the lock anyway. The only thing up there was this antique French-looking couch, light grey, suede velvet, arms angled at 45 degrees, like a lounge couch from the 1920s. For whatever reason, being dumb kids perhaps that we were, we ended up breaking it, snapping the frame and stuffing its twisted remains in a corner nook up there. Eventually, both my brothers moved their rooms up there for a while, and then one moved out, the other moved back downstairs, and I decided to take the attic for myself. One night, around dusk, I was up there alone. Only light in the room was the yellow glow from a streetlight coming through the window, and a small black light behind me. Out of nowhere, I saw the scariest thing that I've ever seen in my entire life. About 10 feet in front of me was this cloud of dark black smoke that appeared, slowly drifting, not fading. It was self-contained, almost like a solid shape of darkness moving on its own. It hovered maybe 2 feet off of the floor, and about 5 foot wide and 3.5 feet tall, and it slowly moved from the window towards the stairwell, completely blocking my only exit. I completely panicked. I yelled for my brother, pulled a blanket over my head like a little kid. After a few seconds, I just bolted. I flew down the stairs, in just a couple of leaps, straight out the door. I remember standing in the yard, looking up at the attic window, trying to figure out if what I saw was even real. Years later, I'm talking like 7 years after we moved out, one of my brothers randomly told me that he saw the same thing up there. I'd never told anyone about it, because I figured no one would believe me. But he described it the exact same way, a black smoke moving across the room. The only difference? He said when he pulled the blankets off his head, he saw the faint outline of a man's head with red eyes staring back at him. I'm convinced it was tied to that couch we broke. If you made it this far, I really appreciate you. This is your narrator speaking. I hope that you have enjoyed this installment of Ghost Stories. Sorry about the background noise. Right as I was recording the last story, some construction started happening outside this apartment. So I'm kind of glad it happened at the end, so you didn't have to listen to this the whole time. But I will be adding the rain soundtrack to this, so hopefully it helps blend it out. But thank you so much for listening, guys, and take care.